Hi folks, this recording is kind of specifically aimed maybe at those of you that were unable to attend the introductory session, which was last Tuesday. So it's really just to provide maybe a kind of a catch up for you. So so I guess the first thing I'd like to emphasize is that you would get set up on Canvas, and I'll give you a link in a minute or in a few minutes to enable you to do that. So you don't have to be formally registered. You can self-enroll. You don't have to be formally registered either on the program or on the module. You can self-enroll to the module on Canvas, and that'll allow you at least access to the materials and therefore to engage with some of the things that we're asking you to do maybe on Canvas. So that would be important to do that, and then allow us to set up groups and all that sort of thing to kind of have some discussions and work through some of the learning, I guess, that we have planned for you. So Aoife started kind of with an introduction to the module and looking at some of the main kind of theories around learning. So her PowerPoint slides are there, and you can have a look at those. For myself, I guess one of the key sort of things that I'm interested in doing in terms of both the program and this particular module is to explore a really central idea that permeates a lot of the literature on teaching and learning in higher education. That's this notion of student-centeredness. It's kind of one of those ideas that's almost used that's used to maybe explore conceptions of teaching and learning. That you can consider kind of there's almost a spectrum from one end, ideas that would be regarded as really teacher-centered, and at the other end you have obviously these very student-centered kind of conceptions. Obviously there's a whole range in the middle, but in many cases there's often almost this binary sort of staff are sort of teacher-centered or are sort of student-centered, yet all the, I guess, literature, all the evidence, kind of everything almost in terms of teaching and learning and assessment and all the sort of development work that's going on at the moment is really advocating moves towards that student-centered perspective, because the evidence suggests that it's it has a much greater impact on real learning that's around understanding maybe rather than just learning off and stuff. So I'm interested really in exploring that idea. I think in order for and I guess the other thing that I would see is in terms of maybe kind of assignments and things towards the end of the semester. It's probably one of those ideas that's maybe less well developed, or perhaps maybe less well understood, or has been less well understood in the past. So this semester I've decided to start off by exploring this idea, by suggesting or encouraging that you actively engage with this idea, in the hope that active engagement allows you to make more sense of it than me just telling you my understanding of what student-centered is about. So I guess that's where we're coming from at the start. So in class, or in the face-to-face session, we kind of talked through this scenario where to some extent, and some of it is based on a little bit of fact, that an external panel has identified that CIT stakeholders understand, and people question that term. What I intended to say was maybe misunderstand the term student-centered learning in a variety of ways, and you've been invited to be part of a working group which is going to try and do something to improve the scenario. And what you're being asked or tasked with is to create a short recording that explains what student-centered learning is, and your target audience is academic staff. So that was kind of the brief. that you're going to create a little resource which explores what student-centered learning is, and then in class we'd have gone through, maybe a typical cycle that would often be classified as problem-based learning, but equally you see similar cycles in what are called inquiry-based kind of learning processes, which might better model what we're doing here, where the group explored what they might already understand by the topic, and then identify a set of questions that they would need answers to in order to maybe fully explore or address the topic. And we spent a bit of time doing that and guiding that process and stuff like that. Kind of some prompts around generating a rich set of questions. In my undergraduate classes, often if they don't generate that rich set of questions, they kind of go down maybe sometimes a narrow kind of space, and if that doesn't really doesn't work out, then particularly in terms of problems, they're kind of stuck and don't know where to go. Whereas the idea is maybe if we create if we explore the space and think of all the possible questions, or at least a number of different types of questions, then there are more possibilities, particularly if we arrive at dead ends and things. So that was kind of what we did in class, and then the idea is that outside of class there's some independent research, so we do some reading and information finding and stuff like that. Try and make some sense, maybe answer some of those questions, or see if there are answers to some of those questions in the readings. And then next week, when I see you on Tuesdays, the idea would be that you would share and integrate and review some of that learning to try and make sense of the space and see, do you have answers to the main questions that you identified, and what might those answers be, and stuff like that. So as I said at the start, so this is obviously a very kind of short intro to what we were doing. As I said at the start, this is the link that you can use to enroll yourself on the module. So if you use that link, or when you use that link, you'll be able to enroll. And again, in terms of kind of supporting this process, there are tools that we can use on Canvas to kind of help share information and all that sort of thing, but it requires that you're enrolled. So until you're up and enrolled, I guess there's sort of limits to what we can do. So it'd be great if you could do that as soon as possible. And then in terms of the reading and things, I would have finished off by saying that we're in here, that within this sort of scenario, the independent research can be done many ways. You can ask students to go off and find information and things, but there's a problem with that, I guess, that if you're kind of a novice to an area, you may not necessarily know what quality looks like, and that can be an issue. So and again, if that's not one of maybe the major outcomes from the module, if it's not a learning outcome, then you might question, is that really what they should be doing? So when it's not a learning outcome, then one of the things that I would do is provide an initial set of resources such as I have here, and then suggest that their strategy might be to take a resource, read through it, and see, does it answer any of the questions that they have, or which of the questions does it answer or partially answer, or that there's things that are relevant. Somebody else might take another resource with the same perspective, and then the meeting, this piece over here, then is about trying to integrate those things and share kind of the perspectives from each of the different resources. The other option, of course, is you can take a question and research the question, and that might involve reading more than one resource. So the suggestion is not that you individually would need to read all of these resources at this point in time, but that you might take one or two of them and look at them in terms of what they say to you about student-centered, what student-centered and what student-centered or being student-centered means. So for those of you that weren't able to make it last Tuesday, then I'm going to suggest that maybe you will form a second group with sort of similar and that you're going to sort of pick up in the same place on Tuesday. That is, that you're going to start, that I'm going to assume that you'll have read one of these, and that we'll be in a position to start sharing and integrating some of that information with a view to creating a resource. In this case, hopefully we'll have at least two groups, so we'll have two resources that will be that you're going to create, and that we can share, and that we can see, you know, how what the perspectives are like in both of those resources. So as I said, if you weren't there, I hope this outline makes some sense to you. Please, if you do have questions, or if some things aren't terribly clear, or the expectation isn't very clear, then please do feel free to contact me, and I'd be more than willing to try and clarify any of those issues, or sort out any of the concerns that you might have. Thanks a million for listening, and look forward to seeing you all on Tuesday.